Hello everyone, and welcome to your video which is going to talk a bit about the roots of negative numbers. So first, let's just remember that we can take the square root of positive numbers all we want, right? We know that the square root of 81 is 9, and we know that the square root of 16 is 4, and we know that the square root of 100 is 10. That's all easy peasy stuff, and we are getting pretty good at that, I would think. What we want to talk about here is how do you take the square root of negative 81? Or how do you take the square root of negative 16? Well, you can't. That's basically what it comes down to. Because when you take the square root of a number, that means that you're looking for two numbers that multiplied together equal the number underneath the radical sign. And we have a problem when we're multiplying just two numbers together to equal a negative number. Because if this number right here is positive, like positive 9, then this one over here has to be positive 9. And positive 9 times positive 9 would give us a positive 81, which is not what we want. So that doesn't work. Likewise, if we were to say, okay, I'll just make this a negative 9, and I have a negative 9, negative 9 times negative 9 is a positive 81, which is not what we're looking for. And we have a problem whenever we're taking the square root of a negative number, because taking a square root means you're looking for two numbers, and unless one of them is positive and one of them is negative, you're never going to get a negative number out here. Does that make sense? So what do we say? Well, what we say is that there's not a real answer. Right? Not a real answer. And the word real here doesn't mean like true. It means a real number as opposed to an imaginary number. So for instance, the square root of 16 could be rewritten as the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 16, right? And this is an I, and this is a 4. So the real answer to what is the square root of 16, the imaginary answer of what is the square root of negative 16 would be 4i. But this is an imaginary number. See how it has a little I there that stands for imaginary, right? This is an imaginary number. And most of the time in your book, they're not going to ask you to come up with the imaginary answer. They're just going to be happy that you know that there's not a real answer. So you don't have to calculate this as part of most of your homework assignments. You do have to be able to indicate that it is not a real answer, or sometimes you might write, it's not a real number. Another way, interestingly, that you could write it is you could write this, which means that it's going to be an I, an imaginary number, times a real number. And this fancy R here is the mathematician's fancy way of writing the set of all real numbers. So that's how you could write it if you wanted to. Okay, I digress. None of this is really required. What's required is that you know that you cannot take the square root of a negative number and get a real answer. Okay, now you're thinking, great, we're less than 4 minutes into this video. We should be done now. Yeah, not. Let's do this. Let's take the cube root of negative 125. So remember, we said that we couldn't take the square root of a number that was negative, but could we take the third root of a number that is negative? Well, this would mean that we need to think of a number that multiplied by itself 3 times equals negative 125. And can you think of such a number? There is one, just so you know. It is negative 5. Because negative 5 times negative 5 gives us a positive 25. And positive 25 times negative 5, that's this one right here, gives us a negative 125. So you can take the cube root of a negative number. Oh, this is getting confusing, huh? Okay, let's try this. Do you think we could take the fourth root of, let me see, let's try the fourth root of negative 16. The fourth root of negative 16. So we need to think of a number that multiplied by itself 4 times gives us negative 16. Can it be done? Well, what if we did a negative 2 times a negative 2 times a negative 2 times a negative 2? That would give us positive 4 times positive 4, which would give us positive 16. Rats. Okay, let's try positive 2 times positive 2 times positive 2 times positive 2. What's that going to give us? Oh, that's going to give us a positive 16. So can we get to a negative number here? No, we cannot. Why? Well, because all of these negative signs cancel each other out into positive signs. So we can't get to a negative number. But could we take the fifth root of, let me see, do I have a fifth root problem? I think, isn't 32 a fifth root? Oops, 32. Hello. I'm thinking 5. I'm writing 2. I'm thinking 2. I'm writing 5. Let's just see. Fifth root of 32 is 2. So the fifth root of negative 32 would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can we do this? Well, let's see. If I did a negative 2 times a negative 2 times a negative 2 times a negative 2 times a negative 2, what do I get? Well, that'll be positive. And that'll be positive, but this one right here will make my whole thing negative. So yes, I can get a negative 32. So have you seen a pattern here yet? I hope you have, but if you haven't, I think I'll spell it out for you. So whenever you are taking the square root of a negative number, which is this is the way that mathematicians might write it. You can write this down at the dinner table tonight and impress your family. They'll have no idea what you're talking about, but you will know that it means you're taking some sort of root to some negative number, right? If n is odd, like 3, 5, 7, yes, you can get an answer. If n is even, no real answer works. Right? So let's just do a quick little test. If I asked you for the fifth root of negative 578, could you get an answer? Why, yes, you could, because this is an odd n, and so you could get an answer because you would be multiplying 5 odd, you would be you would be multiplying 5 negative numbers together to get you a negative a negative 578. What if I asked you for the eighth root of negative 313? Could you do that? No, you could not, because here your n is even, which means that all of your blanks, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, will pair up and the whole thing will give you a positive answer, which is not what we want. Okay, so if your n is odd, you can handle a negative number inside that radical sign. If the n is even, you cannot handle the negative number inside the radical sign. All right, I hope this makes sense.